Fab. So without further ado, let's get started. I think most on this call know me actually, but if we're not connected on LinkedIn, don't hesitate to reach out and get connected there on LinkedIn. Obviously, my name's Dan Jenkins. I'm a commercial director here at Waggated Digital. We are a full service digital agency. As you can see here, this is our Cheltenham office, but we have 3 in London, St Albans, and in Cheltenham as well. And we have a full team of digital marketing specialists covering everything from HubSpot solutions right through to website development, employer branding, and a full service digital agency offering digital marketing tactics. We've amassed a wealth of knowledge and expertise across a wide range of industries, and HubSpot is something that we then apply across a number of different sectors. If you are using HubSpot and you haven't taken advantage of this already, we do have a spot check promotion, which you can get through that QR code. We will literally review your HubSpot usage, offer some of those key takeaways, things you can consider, things you can take forward. And it's a no pressure, completely free of charge solution, and a quick call with one of our specialists to help you get the most out of your HubSpot subscription as well. Fabulous. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to look at a couple of really useful tools that I'm going to showcase, which are going to give you that insight you need for better decision making ultimately, and to be able to kind of quantify that return on investment and really understand kind of the cost of HubSpot and what it's doing for you. We're going to look at best ways to measure long and short-term success and focusing heavily on kind of campaign and centralized campaign activity through HubSpot. We're going to touch then as well upon getting the team buy-in. Obviously, that's slightly more holistic aspect of this in terms of how to get the wider team's buy-in, either to adopt HubSpot or sometimes to continue using HubSpot as well, and a little bit more too. Welcome to those who have just joined us. We will make sure that you get a full copy of this focus session afterwards as well. So something I want to show you first is HubSpot Total Cost of Ownership Calculator, the TCO calculator. Now you can go and have a look at that at hubspot.com/TCO-calculator. But basically, it's a tool in which you can go in and properly calculate the total cost of HubSpot to your organization. You can see that you can pump in all these different details, but you can also put in comparison costs as well. So if you're already using, if you're either already using a tool and you want to make the switch to HubSpot, or you're weighing HubSpot up against another tool, you can start to put in those comparison costs. Now you can see here on this kind of screenshot, you can literally flick through and tick the boxes up and down in terms of volume, and it gives you an idea as to whether that's high, medium, or low relative to kind of industry benchmarks. But you can also manually put those figures in as well. But what this enables you to do is sort of dip in and out of this tool and continuously calculate that total cost of ownership. Now, interestingly, in this example, it was coming in just over 18% less than the competition. And then you can fully download that report, but then you can also use that, and something that I'm going to go into in a moment in a little bit more depth, to calculate your return on investment through the HubSpot ROI calculator, which I'm going to touch on in a moment. So if I just show this again with you, bear with me just a moment. So you can literally populate it with what you need. As I say, you put what hub you're using, whether it's starter, professional, enterprise, you pump in those acquisition costs. Now that includes the subscription cost, any onboarding fees, for example, if you're using a digital agency such as ours, and what those onboarding fees might be, because they can vary depending on the type of need for HubSpot, any integration costs, data migration costs, external system interfaces, acquisition costs. You can get all of this into the same place, and it's just a calculator. But what it will enable you to do is to do that price comparison with your other software, and then, as I say, to use that information to start to actually populate your kind of return on investment. The interesting thing as well, when you start, it focuses the mind in terms of what you need to be thinking about, because it's also things like personnel costs that you can just see at the top of that screen there. So that total cost of personnel. So maybe you've got a HubSpot ambassador in-house, or you need to employ somebody to literally kind of look after your CRM system for you. And you can start to piece all of that together so you've got a much clearer picture in terms of, okay, yes, we've got the subscription cost, but this is our total cost of ownership. And then, as I say, you take that and start to work across the ROI side of things in order to better understand the return on investment that HubSpot is generating for you. So now I'm actually going to move on and touch upon that and HubSpot's kind of ROI calculator. So calculating the potential ROI based on aggregate data. So this is really interesting because this now is based upon a huge amount of data that HubSpot basically has in terms of HubSpot usage. And it calculates the return on investment that you could experience based on aggregated data from over 230,000 HubSpot customers globally. So similarly, previously, this example is marketing, if you're using Marketing Hub. But you can see here, you can pump in a number of things about your organization. So your industry, your region, the currency, you can change the currency of this report. Things like those key metrics, so estimated website visitors, number of deals that are being created, close rates. And then it'll start to give you a full report. So if we just look at this as an example and we were to put information and technology in Europe, and we shift that into pounds, sterling, I put some wild figures in here. So if we looked at kind of a large number of website visitors, let's say that we're kind of, I don't know, e-commerce, or we've got large amounts of traffic. We deal in a relatively large number of deals being created on a monthly basis. We, let's say for every 30 deals, we've actually got 100 marketing qualified leads, for example. We pop our close rate in here. It's a 30% win rate of deals and an average deal amount. Pop the value in there as well. Let's say it's 20,000 over a year. Let's say we deal in quite high volume value investment. You can start to see the return on investment that gives you with Marketing Hub. And again, that is then using HubSpot versus not using HubSpot. So that's if your business is currently in that situation and you pump that in. Now, you can then break that down and start to see, and this again is all based on aggregate data, what's feeding into what. And you can even have a little play, as you can see. You can look at if some numbers are more conservative or more aggressive. But what's really interesting is the bit below that, where you can see the marketing leads without HubSpot compared to the marketing leads with HubSpot. And again, that's based on that aggregated data of the benefits of HubSpot usage. We know that it helps with the through line. We know that it helps with the management of deals. We know that it helps with internal communications and sales teamwork, and even the whole relationship between marketing and sales. So by having that centralized system is going to make a massive difference to an organization. So again, you can start to get a flavor for the type of numbers. And obviously, this is telling us there's a huge return on investment, and we've got a very conservative annual license kind of fee and costs in there. But as you saw on the previous slide, if those costs were more in the tens of thousands, if you were an organization dealing in quite large, sort of turnover, and then obviously CRM investment as well, you can still get that flavor for what is that anticipated return on investment. If we go a bit more conservative, you'll see how the numbers are dynamic and it'll all change. So if we said actually we create about 10 deals monthly, we have around 50 marketing leads, you can see that already it's dynamic within the page. So when you start to use it, especially if you have a gut feel of some of this data or you don't have the accurate data yourself, then you can start to have a play to get a feel. And then obviously you can download that full report. And that's just the Marketing Hub, but I've got a little example in a moment that I'll go into in more depth. But obviously things like Sales Hub as well, if you're looking at more of a sales side of things, and a CRM to look after sales, has the same tool, but with very different kind of prerequisites and requirements. Again, Marketing and Sales Hub, and then you've got Service Hub, Content Hub, Marketing and Content Hub, and Customer Platform as well. But this is really, really powerful, especially in terms of that kind of internal team buy-in, or even if you're evaluating it yourself, if you want to better understand if this is a sound investment or what the expectation should be by adopting the tool. One little tip I would give as well is that whilst this tool is obviously very, very beneficial if you're not using HubSpot, you could even play with it and have a little look and kind of reverse engineer it so that you get the data to a place where it's what you've got when you are using HubSpot, and then work backwards from, well, actually, we expect it to be X percent less if we cut this CRM out, if we stop using a CRM, if we didn't use a CRM. So if you're trying to get that message internally as well, you could work backwards and say, well, actually, I anticipate that in the next year, we're going to turn over an additional, I don't know, whatever the growth target is, we're going to turn over an additional £500,000 in the business, or $500,000. However, looking at this, if we didn't use HubSpot, we should actually expect to only turn over an additional 300, because it's going to impact our operations and reduce by 30% or whatever, what we can expect as an organization. So again, this is a tool that I welcome you to go in and have a little play. It's hubspot.com/ROI hyphen calculator, as you can see in the top in that URL screenshot. And then you can have a little look at that. Just very quickly, kind of a sales example that I wanted to kind of run through with you. So if you look at this now specifically for the sales hub, again, you put some slightly different information in there, but let's say we put kind of the, the sector, let's say 3 deals closed, 37.5 grand average deal size. So we deal in a relatively small number of deals, but high financial volume. Again, you can start to see what that expected ROI should then be from HubSpot. And what's interesting is that in this example that I pulled together, if I just pause that, if I can just pause that quickly. Can I pause that? No, sorry, apologies. It'll run back in a moment. But what you can see in this example is you can start to get a flavor for what is contributing to the increased turnover. Because as we know, sales is not that simple, right? It's not just that suddenly my deal value goes up or suddenly suddenly that deal value is 2 or 3 times. The biggest change here is the close rate. So if you look, we can expect that 88% uplift in close rate. Now that's significant. So what that's doing is leading to the biggest overall increase in turnover. If you look, the deal size amount, they're expecting that it's only going to go up by about 2% on kind of averages. So that's only going to increase by about 500 quid. Now that doesn't move the needle, that doesn't do anything. But significantly increasing your deal close rate and ultimately increasing the number of deals closed, that's what generates the significant increase in ROI. So again, when you look at this ROI calculator, we can start to be able to communicate those messages internally and say, hey, look, this is what we're currently working off. This is our deal close rate. If we adopt a CRM such as HubSpot, we can expect an uplift of X%. And as a result of that, I anticipate our turnover is going to increase by 20% or whatever it might be. So again, you can then really start to piece it all together to be able to get that compelling message internally if you're looking to sell HubSpot internally to your colleagues or your team members, or even get sales team buy-in. Maybe you're a senior leader and you want to utilize HubSpot, but you're struggling to get sales team buy-in and struggling to get that trickling down. Again, that's where you can start to piece it all together and paint the picture to the team of the benefits and why use the tool. So something else now that I just want to move on to off the back of that is what we can sort of do within HubSpot. So it still amazes me the number of brands that adopt HubSpot as a CRM, but they're not necessarily using the full power of reporting within HubSpot. So they're looking at kind of GA4 data, looking at Google Analytics. And again, there's value in that, but you will tend to find that tools will give you different numbers. It's become more and more over the last few years with the changes in cookies and third-party data sharing, that the volume of shared data and the way that tools kind of communicate data is obviously changing. So you will tend to find some slight discrepancies between different reports. But no matter what, we would always recommend building effective custom reports within HubSpot if you're a HubSpot user. So ultimately, it's going to give you that much, much stronger through line. Okay. So one thing that we see more and more is that where brands have sales divisions that are looking after a book of business in kind of Excel spreadsheets or notepads, and it's not centralized, you will tend to find that then you just don't have that visibility. You don't have that through line. So the sales team knows that they closed a deal last month. It was worth £5,000. It was an inbound lead, for example, but they're not able to effectively trace that back through the journey. Now, by building out those effective reports within HubSpot, you're going to be able to get much, much more visibility on first point of interaction right the way through to close deal. So again, you can see it here, like in this screenshot, more and more we look at these multi-touch attribution models, okay, where you can see the kind of the customer journey petering off until you're left with the people that convert at the end. But you can click through and start to piece this information together. And obviously, when you're not, you can get multi-attribution touch points in things like GA4 and Google Analytics, and you can get a feel for customer touch points and how customers are engaging with your brand. But obviously, when you couple that with your CRM data, that's when it becomes really, really powerful, because there's real owned data and information in here as well, especially when you start on a sales process. You can also leverage the ready-made reports though within HubSpot. So see those reports for emails, forms, social ads, workflows, blogs, etc., etc. And in line with all of these pre-built reports, there's also now the Breeze AI. So you've got the ability to ask HubSpot questions. So I use it regularly. I mean, I'm a sales leader. I'm a commercial director at a digital agency. I'm regularly in and out of HubSpot saying things like, of the total number of deals in the pipeline last month, what percentage was closed won? And it will give me those answers. It will give me that information. I don't even have to analyze and process the reports myself. But the point that I'm making here is that with all of that, you can start to better piece together revenue generation. And the more that you can do that, the CRM starts to become invaluable because, you could argue, well, I didn't even have eyes on this before. I didn't know what was attributing to this revenue generation, what was leading to these deals in the pipeline, or we can start to see how that all comes together. But we did do a webinar quite recently that went into much more depth on reporting. Grab the QR code. Again, you'll have all of this in the follow-up and the contents on our website. But if you do want to go and take a look and find out a bit more about reporting and building custom reports, we have a whole webinar that is purely focused on that as well. So the other important thing to touch upon now, and it kind of links up a little bit with reporting and that better kind of demonstration of ROI and what HubSpot is doing for you, is centralized campaign management. Now, again, this is something that's quite heavily underutilized within HubSpot, is being able to centrally manage your campaigns. So up until now, teams might be running LinkedIn paid advertising campaigns, an SEO focus, a Google ad campaign, an email marketing workflow, but it might not necessarily be centralized. But with the campaign functionality within HubSpot, you're able to completely centralize all of the activity, the emails, doing the social media posts, bringing it all together under one roof. And what obviously that is going to give you is a much better visibility on data and a much better and stronger visibility on results. You can see where to access it. You go through marketing, you go through your campaigns, and you can see in this screenshot here how we're looking at everything. We can see the blog posts, the calls to action, the emails, the landing pages, even what social posts we've actually done. And then bring it all together. Look how many clicks these social posts got. Look how much traffic this has generated from email marketing and campaigns and organic social. What does that mean in terms of total website sessions and what's happening here? The difference here is that if you were to go into something like GA4 and you weren't using something centralized, be able to piece all of that together and kind of identify what you got from a marketing campaign is much more challenging. So again, we adopt this as an agency. We utilize this very heavily around live events. So for example, if you're exhibiting at a trade show or you're doing something, peer-to-peer and face-to-face like that, you can run a whole campaign around it. Your landing pages, your blog posts that are associated with it, your social media in the build-up, maybe your email marketing following that event or following that trade show, and you bring it all under this one centralized campaign. So then immediately you can start to say, well, look, from that 3-month campaign that we've just run, that Q1 2025 marketing activity, we influenced X number of contacts, we got X number of engagements. And then where it gets really exciting is that obviously within this campaign, if you've got a strong call to action, a point at which a customer is going to pass on their email information, who they are, express that genuine interest in who you are as a brand, suddenly the data is not just data anymore. It starts to get applied to individuals and businesses, and you can really bring together the true return on investment and what you got from that campaign. So for example, if you ran a 3-month campaign here and you're a B2B business that deals in quite high value leads, let's say you've got all of your social media activity centralized within here, your email marketing within here, and then you can start to see that Joe Bloggs engaged with a social media post. From there, they downloaded a white paper. From there, they received your 4 email marketing plan. And from there, they clicked through or they engaged or it was passed on to the sales team as a marketing qualified lead, and the sales process began, and that turned into a £50,000 deal. That's how you can then see your return on investment from marketing activity. Now, without that, getting full eyes on that full ROI is massively challenging. Piecing it all together with anonymous data and a sudden inquiry, you're back in that world where you're saying, well, we need to ask them on the phone, where did you hear about us? Did you hear about us from a social post? How did you find us? Did you find us on Google? Whereas it's never going to give you the kind of binary data and the clarity that something like centralized campaign management within a CRM is going to give you. So honestly, for marketing teams or teams that are looking for kind of sales and marketing alignment, this is a game changer because again, it's not only showing you kind of, I suppose, how HubSpot is going to help you in terms of quantifying and that ROI, but also how it's just going to give you that level of visibility that you perhaps wouldn't otherwise have. And again, you can see here in this example, this kind of screen grab gives you this kind of overview information. So you can see sessions, influence contacts. 8 contacts are being influenced by this marketing campaign because they are engaging. And then again, if you've got kind of events that you're doing, like marketing events, we've got X number of attendees, X number of registrations. You can piece it all together. Pass that on to the sales team. It's golden because then they can go after these kind of marketing qualified leads, these MQLs or people that and businesses that have engaged with the brand. So just the final thing I want to kind of touch upon is then getting that team buy-in, because obviously you might be in a situation where you're the ambassador for HubSpot, you're the person that really wants to do HubSpot, and you see perhaps some of the value and the possible return on investment, but then communicating that message internally and getting that wider team buy-in can be massively challenging. So starting at the beginning is obviously a very good place to start. So who's going to be included in that? And again, we ran a whole webinar on this, a whole 30-minute webinar, so feel free to go through and take a look. You'll see the content for that on our website. But ultimately, there's something I'm going to share with you in a moment that's going to really help you with that process and how you approach kind of getting that team buy-in. So who's going to be included? Who are the project sponsors, the champions? Who's the implementation team? Who are the team managers? Who's the experienced, influential, and dynamic members of the team that are going to buy into this CRM? And adversely to that, who are the resistant or difficult and more challenging team members? And those challenging team members could be at any level of the organization. Let's be completely honest. It can come at any level. You might have a skeptical director who thinks things shouldn't be done this way, or you might have a junior or a trainee or new people that aren't going to kind of buy into effectively using this on a daily basis. So you need to be able to better identify that to ensure that team buy-in, whether you're working with a very small team or a large team, or indeed with some organizations across multiple teams. So this is something that's really valuable. My colleague Beck shared this with me, and it came from a book whereby there was a theory on identifying the blockers for the adoption of a CRM system. And it helps kind of, you need to take it with a bit of a pinch of salt. Obviously, it's very generalized, but it gives you that kind of idea of who you might need to get that buy-in. You've got that resistant traditionalist, the person who's kind of happy doing things the way they've always done it. They've got a really good sales record, perhaps, or strong marketing credentials, but, there's a degree of trepidation because they don't really want to change the way they do things or go into new ways. But think about how some of the tactics I've mentioned earlier, some of those tools, some of those demonstrable bits and pieces can help to get buy-in of that stakeholder. You've got the overwhelmed skeptic, the person who's really daunted by new things, hesitant to invest time in change, and is likely going to be quite vocal about those concerns. How can you manage that? How can you navigate that? You've got the passive-aggressive non-user, openly accepts change but doesn't implement it fully, tends to find workarounds. So again, how do you encourage that person to say, well, actually, look, if we use this really effectively, look at what we can start to see from a marketing perspective. Look at this through line, look at this clarity, but without that, how are we going to be better at our jobs? How are you going to get that person's buy-in? The misaligned manager who wants to get everyone on board but prioritizes their team over the overall goals of the company. And then the procrastinator, so ultimately avoids kind of playing by the rules, stating a lack of time or resources, fears change that they aren't motivated towards. That's a really interesting thing. I think just a final point on that. One of the biggest challenges with bringing any kind of a tool into an organization is obviously getting team buy-in, but ultimately people that are then not motivated or they're scared of that change. Think about how you can bring that person and all of these people on the journey with you. So if you're playing with that ROI calculator, if you're looking at ways to better quantify that ROI from the CRM, how can you communicate that through, so that you're not just landing things on people's desks? How can you bring people on a journey with you and help them kind of understand and see the benefits ultimately of the CRM system, so that you're all kind of, to use classic kind of corporate business cliches, you're all kind of paddling in the same direction rather than paddling in opposite directions as well. So how do we do that? Well, just a final point on that. Speak one-to-one with the team leaders and managers to understand goals. Organize workshops at team level to understand current processes and challenges. Workshops can be really beneficial. Ask the team, what are your challenges? What do you want to see from a CRM? What's holding you back in your role? What's stopping you from achieving your goals? Document everything and systematically address each part during the build. So if you are then adopting a CRM system, address these things as you go. Don't let them just kind of simmer under the surface. And finally, keep people involved and give and accept that feedback and communicate the bigger picture throughout the process as well. And again, it's got to come back to that bigger picture. It's got to come back to the overarching business goals, the turnover objectives, the growth objectives, what it is that you want to achieve as an organization, and how this tool is going to support and elevate that as well. Fab. So we're going to quickly open it up to any questions. I'm just going to quickly address one that came through initially personally. So I have had one question come through, which it goes back to the ROI calculator, but I'm just going to touch upon it. It was just upon the accuracy of data and how to actually make sure that you can turn that into meaningful data from the ROI calculator. So that's really interesting. So obviously it is backed by real data. It's backed by aggregate collected data in terms of HubSpot users. I think the key is looking at balancing that with a degree of your own knowledge of the business, your own expectation. Obviously, what it's not going to take in is sort of changing marketplaces and things that can happen at the drop of a hat. We saw what happened recently with Trump, can completely change a global economy over a 4-week period, for example. But what you do need to do is then have a little play and look at the conservative and the aggressive elements and utilize that for its own benefit. But obviously, it's based on real numbers. It's backed by real data, so it can then help to give you that clarity and that insight. And obviously, the more information that you've got as an organization, the things that we were pumping in there in terms of either website traffic or deal close rates and things like that, the more that you know that about your own organization, the more clarity and the clearer picture that you're going to have in terms of what it pumps out for you as well. So yeah, it's a super useful tool. And then I think that it's about what you put into it in terms of what you get out too. Fab, any other final questions or anything that anybody wanted to ask? No, fab, brilliant. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining this session. I hope you find it beneficial. We will make sure that you get a full copy of a deck and the full copy of the recording afterwards as well. If you have any questions in the meantime, or there's anything that you would like to discuss, please don't. Sorry, I've just had a question come through. Yeah, it's a great question. So I've had a question come through about size of organization. Yeah, great question. So yeah, so obviously, we talked a little bit about if you have large sales teams or if you've got multiple people that you need to try and get the kind of stakeholder buy-in with. What about if you've got smaller teams? Well, actually, that's in principle, a little bit more straightforward in the sense that you haven't got as many stakeholders to juggle. You haven't got as many different entities, different teams. What I would say is not to then fall into a trap of kind of assuming that user adoption is going to be easy and it's just going to happen naturally. And you can have, what you can fall into the trap of is those conversations that happen over the computer, those conversations that happen side by side, those things that aren't kind of captured by a CRM. Whereas in bigger teams, everything is either through Teams meetings or Zoom meetings or international communication, for example. So one of the biggest things to think about is how you're then still using that CRM effectively. So that's something that's really, really important. So, we use Fathom as an AI note taker. There's loads of other options out there. You've got Fathom, you've got Gong, as much as possible, capture information, have AI note takers in the room, have them on your online communications. All of that information is going to be pumped into there to help you to piece together your sales and marketing activity. One thing I would still consider doing is that even in smaller teams to give a person an ambassador role. I think no matter what, even if you're working with 5 people, for example, and one is looking after sales, one is looking after marketing, one is a managing director, one is operations, one is finance, and you're the CEO, for example, in a small SME with a team of 6. Even bearing that in mind, who is the champion? Who is the ambassador for HubSpot within the organization? Is it the marketing person? Is it the salesperson? Is it actually the operations person because they've got better visibility over everything? So I do think that it's really important to consider, especially when you're working then with a smaller number of users, that you don't lose sight of some of those best practice approaches, whether there's 5, 10, 15, or 20 people on the team. So I do think that you would then look to kind of apply that on a lower level. The other thing with that is that the smaller the team, and that you could still be dealing with high volumes of data, or you could be dealing with low volumes of data. You could be dealing with, focused inquiries, relatively high deal volume but low number of deals, for example. So again, the more that's the case, think about the accuracy of what is then going into that CRM system to be able to better quantify that ROI. Fab. Another question. Yeah. So I'm just looking at this question. Yes. So I've had another question come through, which is slightly associated to the previous one, and again, I'm more than happy to pick up this separately with this person, but I'll also just address it quickly here on the call. Yeah, and now this is something that's applicable for small teams or big teams, is the everyone's always busy thing. It's the biggest challenge with any kind of adoption is that, or change in an organization. Anything, if you change your one-to-one structure, from an HR perspective, you change the way that you onboard new starters and you go, right, we need to change our onboarding system. We need to find the time to do that. Everybody is so busy doing the day-to-day that then bringing this in is a massive challenge. So I would look at tactics like gamification. What do I mean by that? Well, find ways to kind of stimulate, to get people's buy-in. Have a look at how much people are engaging with the CRM and reward them for that. Run workshops, have dedicated time. We as an agency, for example, every Monday morning, we have a team meeting to kick off the week at Wagoner. So our Monday morning team meeting lasts from roughly around 30 to 45 minutes. It covers a number of different areas and it happens every Monday. Now, the important aspect of that, though, is what areas does it cover? And one is a 5-minute segment on HubSpot tips and HubSpot usage. So literally every single Monday, we as a team are sharing our HubSpot tips and HubSpot users. And there's always something new. There's always something that at least 40, 50% of the people on that call, always changing, will have not done before, will not know, will not use. So having that way of kind of sharing that internally, making it regular, making it cyclical, making it frequent is going to be really, really powerful. Also, internally sharing kind of use cases. So being able to effectively say, well, look, I did this last month and this is what I achieved off the back of that. And being able to share that internally is going to continuously generate that good buy-in and help people to start to get the understanding of how it's going to benefit them. Because they think, well, if it worked for, Sarah in the marketing team, it's going to work for Sam in sales, or find ways of sort of getting that kind of buy-in across teams as well. So again, yes, demonstrating functionality, showing those benefits, it's a massive challenge. And I think have a little look on our website. If you go onto the resources, I'll ask the team to send it in the follow-up as well, but we did a whole webinar on getting team buy-in specifically, and there's some lovely stuff in there. So I touched upon a little bit of it, but there'll be a lot more that you can go through there, which will really help in terms of demonstrating the benefits and how to get that buy-in. Fab, any other final questions? No? Wonderful, brilliant. Well, look, it's been really lovely to see you all. If anybody's got any questions or they would like to take things further, please don't hesitate to reach out to connect with me on LinkedIn. When you get the follow-up, you'll get all the information for our forthcoming webinars as well. Get yourself signed up. But in the meantime, all the very best and good luck on your LinkedIn and HubSpot journey. Some lovely messages coming through in the chats here. Thank you so much, Oliver. Great to see you on the call. Really glad you found it beneficial. Thank you, Iwan. Thank you very much, Alice. Cheers to Julian. And yeah, all those who joined, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everybody. All the very best. Bye-bye.